Hey everybody, welcome back to All Fiction is Fantasy. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, today we are going to continue our examination of some of the fiction that inspired the Arkham horror board game. And today we will take a look at Cthulhu, and we will review the Call of Cthulhu, written by H.P. Lovecraft and originally published in Weird Tales in 1928. So Cthulhu, perhaps the most famous of the great old ones, with familial relations to Azathoth, Yog-Sothoth, Shub-Niggurath, and Nug. Cthulhu, the great old one who sleeps under the seas of Earth in the ancient city of Arlier. He came to Earth from the deep reaches of outer space, making him an alien entity, adding the cosmic to the cosmic horror genre. I've often wondered why Cthulhu enjoys his pop culture status, and I think it's because of a very simple reason. He is easy to depict in art and literature. Many of the outer gods and great old ones and beasts of the mythos are indescribable, or they are described as a mass of writhing tentacles with bodies that seem to be phasing in and out of other dimensions. But Cthulhu? Well, he's basically a giant slimy green humanoid with 2 arms, 2 legs, wings like a dragon, and an octopus for a head. Even if you've never seen a depiction of Cthulhu, based on that description you just heard, you could probably draw a pretty good likeness. According to Lovecraft history, he envisioned the mythos to be known as Yog-Sothoth, but it was August Derleth and Arkham House books which pushed for the term the Cthulhu mythos. And then came all of the other Cthulhu fiction, especially the stories written by Brian Lumley and those that inspired the Call of Cthulhu RPG, and well, the rest is history. Again, this does reinforce the idea that when we often think of things based on Lovecraftian fiction, we are actually thinking of things based on dozens of different sources, artists, and authors. Okay, and now let's turn to Call of Cthulhu, written by H.P. Lovecraft, originally published in 1928 in Weird Tales. When I was thinking about what to read to cover Cthulhu, the great old one, the big boy himself, I toyed with reading a lesser-known work, but decided to return to the original classic. It's been many years since I revisited it, and I think it's a perfect example of Lovecraft's fiction. The highs and the lows. Call of Cthulhu is a short story, maybe a novelette. It's a long short story, and it's told in 3 parts. It actually opens with one of Lovecraft's most iconic paragraphs, and I'm going to read that for you here. So this is from part 1, The Horror in Clay. The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents. We live in a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far. The sciences, each straining in its own direction, have hitherto harmed us little, but some day the piecing together of disassociated knowledge will open up such terrifying vistas of reality and of our frightful position therein, that we shall either go mad from the revelation or flee from the deadly light into the peace and safety of a new dark age. That's a really great paragraph, and I think one that does a fantastic job of depicting the entire outlook of the Cthulhu mythos fiction. So part 1 is highly inspired by Robert W. Chambers, and I think his stories, The Repairer of Reputations and The Yellow Sign. It deals with a kind of mass hysteria that transmits to sensitive people, aka artists and poets, around the world, showing how the idea of Cthulhu can spread like a mind virus. Part 2 deals with the various cults devoted to Cthulhu, and Part 3 is basically a Godzilla story in which Cthulhu, like a giant kaiju, emerges from his ancient slumber to terrorize a shipping vessel. The idea of Cthulhu being this alien entity lying dormant on Earth or under the seas of Earth, this kind of evil entity to discover a presence of madness, of insanity that lurks just below the surface is the basic idea of the horror behind Cthulhu and the entire Cthulhu mythos. Call of Cthulhu is told in a passive voice, like a lot of Lovecraft's fiction. It's told from the point of view of characters who are discovering, learning, and reading about the horror, rather than experiencing it for themselves. But in doing so, they too experience some of the horror's effects. There is a residual effect just from learning about a thing's existence. This reinforces the idea that we, the readers of the stories, may not actually be safe because we too are learning about this esoteric knowledge. Call of Cthulhu contains some of Lovecraft's best and worst. At its worst, it's incredibly jingoistic, with a lot of the fear directed towards the other, the outsider, or in this case, the non-white people. At one point, the non-whites are called degraded and ignorant creatures with loathsome ideas. Now, I totally understand that an author's characters don't have to represent the author themselves. Joe R. Lansdale and Stephen King both have stories with bigoted characters. However, I know how they are as people, so I know that their characters aren't reflections of them. They write stories about bigotry and the dangers of bullying. But the same cannot be said of Lovecraft. We know from his personal writings that he was racist. However, right after a particular abhorrent paragraph, Lovecraft launches into some of the best horror writing I've ever read, and unleashes an insanely awesome info dump of the entire mythos. For an author who often held his cards close to his chest, in Call of Cthulhu, Lovecraft reveals a ton of information. It's this dichotomy that we as modern readers must keep in mind. We can enjoy the good, but we must also acknowledge the bad, and let it be stated perfectly clear for those who think otherwise. No one here is canceling Lovecraft. Now I want to read some of that really good writing, and I'm going to turn to, turning to page 38 of the Cthulhu Cycle, edited by Robert M. Price. And here we learn all about the cults of Cthulhu. They worship, so they said, the great old ones who lived ages before there were any men, and who came to the young world out of the sky. Those old ones were gone now, inside the earth and under the sea. But their dead bodies had told their secrets in dreams to the first men, who formed a cult which had never died. This was that cult, and the prisoners said it had always existed and always would exist, hidden in distant wastes and dark places all over the world, until the time when the great priest Cthulhu, from his dark house in the mighty city of Aurele, under the waters, should rise and bring the earth again beneath his sway. Someday he would call when the stars were ready, and the secret cult would always be waiting to liberate him. Meanwhile, no more must be told. There was a secret which even torture could not extract. Mankind was not absolutely alone among the conscious things of earth, for shapes came out of the dark to visit the faithful few. But those were not the great old ones. No man had ever seen the old ones. The carven idol was great Cthulhu, but none might say whether or not the others were precisely like him. No one could read the old writing now, but things were told by word of mouth. The chanted ritual was not the secret. That was never spoken aloud, only whispered. The chant meant only this: in his house at Aurele, dead Cthulhu waits dreaming. These great old ones, Castro continued, were not composed altogether of flesh and blood. They had shape, for did not this star-fashioned image prove it? But that shape was not made of matter. When the stars were right, they could plunge from world to world through the sky, but when the stars were wrong, they could not live. But although they no longer lived, they would never really die. That's some really good writing, and I love that section in the Call of Cthulhu. It is probably my favorite section in the entire story. Call of Cthulhu also contains some clunky writing, and I can see the prose and style turning some people away, especially new readers who have grown up with Lovecraft, with people that Lovecraft has inspired, with new literary horror from the likes of people like Vandermeer, Sisko, Ligotti, and others. There are multiple times in which Lovecraft uses the word really as an adverb, as in someone was really tired. It's amateurish in many ways. I know that I say the word really a lot and I'm conscious of it and I tried not to, but I'm also not a writer and I know I have a limited speaking vocabulary. And if I were to write a short story, I know not to say someone was really tired. I would say they were exhausted or something like that. I can also see the passive voice turning some people off. The point of view characters are rarely in danger in the story. They're simply reading about the danger. However, like I said earlier, I think this does a good job of reinforcing the kind of metatextual nature of weird fiction, of how we, the readers, aren't safe just because we are simply reading about something. Who knows what we might learn and how it might influence our own lives.